Have you ever felt a knot in your stomach, a cold certainty that something is deeply wrong, even when the world tells you you're just being emotional? Have you ever been dismissed by someone you love, made to feel small for a feeling you couldn't shake? This is a story about that feeling. It's about a woman named Eliza, who was told she was overreacting, but whose instinct led her to a truth that would not only shatter her reality, but rebuild it into something far stronger. The air in the house was thick with a silence that felt heavier than shouting. It was their 10th anniversary, a day that was supposed to be marked with champagne bubbles and the low hum of a romantic restaurant. Instead, it was filled with the lingering chill of a slammed door. Eliza stood in the hallway, the sleek black dress she'd planned to wear hanging limply on its hook, a silk accusation. Her husband, Mark, had just left for the gym, his parting words echoing in the pristine quiet. "For God's sake, Eliza, it's just a babysitter. We can go out another night. Stop making everything a catastrophe." But it wasn't just a babysitter. It was Maya, a bright, gentle college student with eyes that seemed to hold a wisdom far beyond her 19 years. In the few weeks Maya had watched their children, 6-year-old Chloe and baby Leo, she had brought a sense of calm to their chaotic home that Eliza hadn't realized was missing. Chloe, usually shy and reserved with strangers, adored her. And Leo, who often fussed, would melt into Maya's arms as if he'd known her forever. Mark, however, had been skeptical from the start. He called her the quiet one, his tone laced with a suspicion Eliza couldn't comprehend. He'd watch her on the security cameras from his phone, a habit he claimed was for safety but felt more like an interrogation. "She just sits there," he'd commented a week ago, showing Eliza a clip of Maya reading a textbook at their kitchen island while the children slept. "It's weird. Doesn't she have a phone to scroll like a normal teenager?" Eliza had defended her. "She's studying, Mark. She's responsible," but Mark had already made up his mind. And today, an hour before their reservation, he had canceled on Maya with a curt text, claiming Leo was coming down with something. It was a blatant lie. A power play. He hadn't asked Eliza, he had informed her. And in that moment, the canceled dinner, the wasted dress, it all became a symbol of a much larger erosion. The erosion of her voice in their marriage. Now, alone in the quiet house, a storm of frustration and hurt brewed inside her. But beneath it, another feeling began to surface, a sharp, insistent curiosity. Why did Mark dislike Maya so intensely? What had he seen that she hadn't? His dismissal felt too personal, too vehement. With a steadying breath, Eliza walked to the study. She sat down at the large oak desk, the leather chair cold against her skin. She pulled up the security camera application on the desktop computer, the grid of their home appearing in sharp, silent detail. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe evidence that Mark was right. Maybe a small flaw, a moment of carelessness that would justify his paranoia and allow her to let it go. Her finger hovered over the mouse, a sense of dread and determination warring within her. She was going to find the truth, no matter what it was. She clicked on the archives, her journey into the recorded past of her own home beginning. She started scrolling back through the saved footage from the previous week, the day Mark had made his weird comment about Maya studying. The timeline was a series of silent, sped-up vignettes, Chloe running through the living room, Leo crawling across his playmat, the sun arcing across the sky outside the windows. Eliza felt a pang of guilt, like a voyeur in her own life. She slowed the footage to normal speed as the evening approached. She saw herself and Mark leaving, waving goodbye. Then the camera's view settled on the living room, where Maya was on the floor, building a magnificent tower of blocks with Chloe. There was no detachment, no sense of it being a job. Maya was completely present, her face lit with genuine delight as Chloe carefully placed the final block on top. They high-fived, a silent, joyous explosion on the screen. Later, after the children were asleep, the footage shifted to the kitchen camera, the one Mark had referenced. There was Maya, sitting at the island, a thick biology textbook open in front of her. A stack of flashcards was neatly piled to her side. For nearly 2 hours, she didn't move, except to turn a page or jot down a note. She wasn't scrolling on her phone. She wasn't watching their television. She was working, her brow furrowed in concentration. Eliza felt a swell of admiration. This was the focus of a person determined to succeed. She fast-forwarded slightly, and then she saw it. Maya packed up her books, her movements efficient and tidy. She wiped down the counter, even though it was already clean. She then walked to the refrigerator. Eliza leaned closer to the screen. Maya opened the door and hesitated, her hand hovering for a moment before she pulled out the container of leftover pasta Eliza had told her she could have. She placed it on the counter and opened it. Then she paused again. She looked down at the food, then back towards the hallway leading to the bedrooms, as if to ensure the children were still asleep. A strange, unreadable expression crossed her face. It wasn't hunger, not exactly. It was something more complicated. Hesitation. Guilt. She took a fork from the drawer, but then, instead of taking the whole container to the table, she carefully spooned a small portion, maybe a quarter of what was there, onto a small plate. She put the larger container back in the fridge, pushing it to the very back, almost hiding it. As she ate the tiny meal, her bites were slow, measured. Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing something private, something deeply significant. It wasn't the act of eating leftover pasta. It was the way she was eating it. It was the careful preservation of the rest, the way she treated a simple meal like a precious resource. A cold unease began to creep up Eliza's spine. This wasn't the behavior of a weird teenager. This was the behavior of someone who was accustomed to scarcity. The image of that small plate, the carefully rationed food, burned into her mind. It was a single frame in hours of footage, a detail so minor Mark would have scrolled right past it, but to Eliza, it felt like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. She knew she had to look further. This single, quiet moment had changed the entire focus of her search. She was no longer looking for Maya's flaws. She was looking for her story. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, scrolling back another week, then another. She ignored the daytime hours, the comings and goings of her own family, and focused only on the evenings Maya was there. She found more scenes of profound tenderness. She watched Maya patiently teach Chloe how to tie her shoes, her small hands guiding Chloe's clumsy fingers again and again, with no trace of impatience. She saw her spend 20 minutes meticulously cleaning a stain off the rug after Leo had tipped his juice cup, refusing the money Eliza had tried to give her for the professional cleaning supplies she used. Each clip added another layer to the portrait of a young woman who was not just responsible, but deeply, intrinsically kind. And then, Eliza found the video that would stop her heart. It was from 3 weeks ago, Maya's second time babysitting. It was late, close to midnight. The house was dark, save for a single lamp in the living room. The baby monitor on the counter crackled to life, and Eliza watched Maya's head snap up from her textbook. She moved with an exhausted grace to the nursery. Eliza switched the camera feed to the one in Leo's room. The image was grainy, cast in the ethereal green of the night vision. Leo was standing in his crib, not screaming, but whimpering, his small body trembling. Maya didn't turn on the light. She simply scooped him up, his head immediately finding the crook of her neck. She began to rock him, humming a soft, wordless lullaby. Eliza watched, her own maternal heart aching in sympathy. And then she saw it. As Maya swayed back and forth, her face turned slightly toward the camera. A tear, then another, traced a silent path down her cheek. Her expression was one of profound, bone-deep sorrow. Her own eyes were closed, her brow furrowed in pain, even as she comforted the child in her arms. She wasn't just calming a fussy baby. She was finding solace for a hurt that was entirely her own, borrowing the comfort she was giving. Eliza's breath hitched. She clicked the button to activate the audio, needing to hear, to understand. The humming stopped, and Maya's voice, a raw, fractured whisper, filled the silence of the study. "It's okay," she whispered to Leo, but her words were for someone else, for herself. "It's okay to be sad. But we have to be strong. We have to keep going. For them. We have to." The last words were choked, broken by a sob she quickly stifled. She held Leo tighter, burying her face in his soft hair, her shoulders shaking with silent grief. Eliza felt as if the air had been vacuumed from her lungs. She was frozen, her hand clutching the mouse, her eyes locked on the weeping girl on the screen. This was not a teenager having a bad day. This was a young woman carrying a burden so heavy she could barely stand it, a grief so immense that it spilled out in the dark, in the quiet moments when she thought no one was watching. The carefully portioned meal, the intense focus on her studies, the overwhelming wave of sadness in the nursery, it all coalesced into a devastating picture. Mark hadn't seen this. He had seen a quiet girl and called her weird. He had seen a responsible student and called her suspicious. He had never once stopped to consider the life that existed behind her gentle smile. He had judged the cover and, in his arrogance, had tried to throw the book away. A new feeling surged through Eliza, eclipsing the hurt and frustration. It was a fierce, protective fire. A rage, not at Mark's controlling nature, but at his profound lack of empathy. How could he live in a world so full of people and see so little? How could he stand in this home, with his healthy children and his comfortable life, and pass such a cold, unthinking judgment on a girl who was so clearly struggling to survive? The anniversary was forgotten. The fight, the dress, the canceled dinner, it all felt laughably insignificant now. This was real. This was a person's hidden pain, laid bare in the green-tinged glow of a baby monitor. Eliza clicked Save Clip, her movements precise and deliberate. She saved the footage of the rationed pasta. She saved the footage of the heartbreaking lullaby. She was no longer a wife trying to win an argument. She was a witness. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this footage would change everything. Not just for Maya, but for them. Mark came home an hour later. The scent of the gym, of exertion and casual effort, clung to him. He walked into the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge, his posture defensive, clearly expecting the Cold War to continue. Still mad, he asked, his attempt at levity falling flat in the heavy silence. Eliza was sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She looked up at him, and the expression on her face stopped him cold. There was no anger there, no petulance. There was just a deep, unnerving calm. "No, I'm not mad," she said, her voice even. "But you and I are going to sit down. Right now. There's something you need to see." His brow furrowed in confusion, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Eliza, I'm tired. Whatever it is, can it wait?" "No," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "It cannot wait." There was a new authority in her voice, a steel he hadn't heard in years. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Intrigued and a little unnerved, he pulled out a chair and sat down opposite her. He glanced at the laptop screen, expecting to see a spreadsheet of their finances or a holiday booking, the usual topics of their serious discussions. Instead, he saw the familiar interface of their security camera software. He sighed, a wave of exasperation washing over him. "Oh, for crying out loud. Are we back to the babysitter?" "Eliza, I told you, I have a bad feeling about her." "She's not." Bubbly enough, Eliza didn't argue. She didn't defend. She simply turned the laptop to face him and pressed play. The first clip appeared on the screen, Maya in the kitchen, carefully separating the pasta, eating her small portion, and putting the rest back. Mark watched, his expression dismissive at first. "See? It's weird. Why wouldn't she just eat it?" he started, but Eliza held up a hand, her eyes commanding him to keep watching, to truly see. She played it again, this time zooming in on Maya's face, on the careful, almost reverent way she handled the food. "Look at her, Mark," Eliza said softly. "Don't just watch. See. Does that look like someone being weird? Or does that look like someone who is hungry, but is trying to make a small amount of food last?" Mark's mouth tightened. He said nothing. He was a man who dealt in facts and figures, in profit and loss. This was different. This was intangible, an emotional nuance he was ill-equipped to process. Before he could formulate a cynical response, Eliza clicked on the second file. The screen shifted to the grainy, night vision world of Leo's nursery. He saw Maya pick up their son, rocking him gently. He saw the tears begin to fall. He saw her face, contorted in a grief that was terrifying in its intensity. He leaned forward, his own defensiveness beginning to crack. Then Eliza unmuted the audio. Maya's whispered words filled the kitchen. "We have to be strong. We have to keep going." For them, the sound of her choked sob was like a physical blow. Mark flinched, his eyes widening. He looked from the crying girl on the screen to his wife's resolute face. He played the clip again, and then a third time. The arrogant certainty that had defined him just minutes before crumbled into dust, leaving behind a hollow cavern of shame. He saw it now. He saw the exhaustion she tried so hard to hide. He saw the immense weight on her shoulders. He saw that her quietness wasn't aloofness, it was the stillness of a person conserving every ounce of energy just to stay upright. His judgment, his flippant dismissal, his bad feeling, it all seemed so grotesque now, so profoundly cruel. He had punished a young woman not for a single misstep or fault, but for the quiet dignity with which she carried her suffering. The silence in the kitchen stretched on, but it was a different kind of silence now. It wasn't the absence of words, it was the presence of a truth so overwhelming it left no room for them. Finally, Mark looked up from the laptop, his eyes meeting Eliza's. The usual confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, humbling vulnerability. "My God," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "What have I done?" Eliza's expression softened. The fire in her eyes was no longer about proving him wrong, it was about leading them both toward what was right. "What are we going to do?" she asked, the question a shared burden, a shared responsibility. The "we" hung in the air, a bridge being rebuilt over the chasm that had opened between them. Mark stared at the frozen image of Maya on the screen, his mind racing. His entire perspective had been violently reoriented. The world, which had seemed so simple and straightforward, suddenly felt infinitely more complex, filled with hidden stories and silent struggles. He thought of his own complaints, a tough day at the office, a deal that fell through, traffic. They were insults in the face of this girl's reality. "We call her," Mark said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old decisiveness, but tempered now with a new, unfamiliar humility. "We don't text. We call her. We ask her to come over. Not to babysit. Just to talk." Eliza nodded, a single, grateful tear tracing a path down her own cheek. This was the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had gotten lost somewhere beneath years of stress and ambition. He was still there. She had just needed to hold up the right mirror for him to see himself again. They found Maya's number and Mark made the call. His voice was gentle, hesitant. He apologized for canceling so abruptly and asked if she would be willing to stop by for a few minutes to discuss something. Maya's voice on the other end was wary, guarded. She likely thought she was about to be fired for some unknown infraction. She agreed to come, but the apprehension in her tone was palpable. While they waited, neither of them spoke. They simply sat, the weight of their new knowledge settling over them. When the doorbell rang 20 minutes later, it felt like a summons. Eliza opened the door to find Maya standing on the porch, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her face pale with anxiety. "Hi, Maya." "Thanks for coming," Eliza said, her voice warm and reassuring. "Please, come in." They led her not to the formal living room, but to the comfortable chairs in the family room. Mark, to Eliza's surprise, was the one who spoke first. "Maya," he began, his voice earnest. "First, I need to apologize. I was rude and dismissive today, and there's no excuse for it. I am truly sorry." Maya looked from Mark to Eliza, her confusion deepening. "It's okay," she said quietly, though her posture remained tense. Eliza took a deep breath. "Maya, we saw something on the security camera footage," she said gently. Maya's face fell. Her eyes darted to the floor, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Was I on my phone? Did I do something wrong?" "I promise I never." "No," Mark interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "You did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. We saw that you were having a difficult time. And we saw that you might be struggling." He said the word struggling with a gentleness that astounded Eliza. Maya looked up, her eyes wide with shock and a dawning horror of being discovered. The carefully constructed walls around her privacy began to crumble. Tears welled in her eyes, the same tears Eliza had seen on the monitor, but this time, she didn't try to hide them. She started, but her voice broke. With gentle, patient questions, they pieced together her story. Her parents had been killed in a car accident a year and a half ago. She was left as the sole guardian of her two younger siblings, a brother of 14 and a sister of 12. They lived in a tiny apartment across town, scraping by on a small amount of survivor benefits and whatever Maya could earn from a patchwork of part-time jobs, a morning shift at a coffee shop, evening babysitting gigs, and weekend shifts at a bookstore. Her studies were her only hope for a future, a lifeline she clung to with ferocious tenacity. The pasta she had rationed was supposed to be her lunch for the next day. The grief she had shown in Leo's room was the ever-present weight of her loss, a sorrow she only allowed herself to feel when she thought she was completely alone. She was not a 19-year-old girl. She was the head of a household, a mother, a sister, and a provider, all wrapped in a package the world saw as just a kid. The story spilled out of her, a torrent of exhaustion, fear, and overwhelming responsibility. By the end, all three of them were crying. Mark, a man who hadn't shed a tear in years, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his face a mask of profound regret and newfound purpose. He looked at Eliza, and in his eyes, she saw their resolution. This was not a problem to be pitted. This was a situation that demanded action. It was Mark who laid out the plan, his mind, usually focused on corporate strategy, now laser-focused on a strategy of compassion. "This is not charity, Maya," he said, his voice steady and clear. "This is an offer. A job. We need someone we can trust with our children. Someone kind and responsible. That's you. We want to offer you a position, not as an hourly babysitter, but as a part-time household manager. With a salary. A real one, that you can count on every month." Maya stared at him, speechless. "Your hours would be structured around your college classes," Eliza added, leaning forward. "You can study here when the kids are asleep. You can eat whatever is in the fridge, please. Eat whatever is in the fridge. We can help you find tutoring resources for your brother, after-school programs for your sister. We can be your backup." Maya looked back and forth between them, her expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning hope. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" It was Eliza who answered, her voice full of the truth that had settled in her heart. "Because we all have battles," she said softly. "And no one should have to fight them alone. We were blind to yours, and we are so sorry for that. Please, let us help." For a long moment, Maya was silent, the sheer magnitude of the offer washing over her. The dam of her resilience, of her fierce, lonely independence, finally broke. She nodded, a sob of pure, unadulterated relief shaking her entire body. It was a sound of a burden being lifted, of a long winter finally giving way to the hope of spring. In that moment, the room was no longer occupied by an employer and an employee, but by three people bound by a shared, sudden, and powerful humanity. Weeks turned into months. The arrangement transformed all of their lives. Maya thrived. With the stability of a real salary, she was able to quit her other jobs and focus on her education. The constant, gnawing anxiety that had been her shadow began to recede. Color returned to her cheeks. Her quietness blossomed into a gentle confidence. She would laugh with Chloe in the kitchen, her voice light and free. She would bring her siblings over on weekends, and the house would fill with the chaotic, joyful noise of children playing. The home was no longer just a space, it was a sanctuary. But the greatest transformation was between Eliza and Mark. The chasm of misunderstanding had been filled with a new, profound respect. Mark looked at his wife differently now, with an admiration for the emotional intelligence he had once dismissed as sentimentality. He saw her instinct not as a weakness, but as a superpower. He started listening, truly listening, not just to her words, but to the feelings behind them. The incident with the camera became a defining moment in their marriage, a painful but necessary reset. They had been reminded of a fundamental truth, that a partnership is not about being right, but about being compassionate. They had almost lost each other in the silent spaces between them, but by choosing to see the invisible struggle of another human being, they had found their way back. What if Eliza had just accepted her husband's decision? What if she had let her frustration simmer into resentment and gone to bed angry, another crack forming in the foundation of her marriage? The truth of a young girl's struggle would have remained hidden, and a chance for profound grace would have been missed. This story reminds us that behind every face is a story, and behind every silence is a battle we cannot see. The people we pass by every day, the quiet cashier, the tired janitor, the withdrawn coworker, are all living lives as complex and fraught as our own. We have a choice. We can look, or we can truly see. We can judge, or we can choose to wonder. The next time you feel that knot in your stomach, that instinct that something is deeper than it appears, trust it. Look closer. Listen harder. Because empathy is not a passive feeling. It is an active choice. And it is the one choice that has the power to change not just one life, but our own. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of looking closer. And in the comments below, tell us about a time when you chose empathy over judgment. Let's remind each other that the greatest strength we have is our ability to see the humanity in everyone.